You're born somewhere in Essos, doesn't matter where. Because one day, a man with a title and a debt looks at you and says,
"Congrats. You're diplomacy now."
that's how it starts. Not with love, not with choice, with a transaction, and then you hear the phrase that should have come with a warning label. Married to a Khal. People love to romanticize Dothraki weddings like they're a vibe. Horses, drums, braids, sunlight, wild freedom. But if you're the bride, it's not a vibe. It's a survival game with a veil. Because being a Dothraki bride isn't marrying a person. It's being adopted by a war machine as property. And the war machine has rules. Very simple rules. Like, if he's strong, you live. If he's weak, you disappear. Welcome to the khalasar. Enjoy your stay. Try not to fall off the horse. Because falling is not oops. Falling is social commentary. The trade, you're not a bride, you're a receipt. Let's start with the most insulting part. Most brides get a wedding registry. You get a purchase order. In the show, Daenerys is sold to Drogo like she's a political coupon. Viserys talks about her like she's a bag of coin with hair. He's not like,
"My sister is starting a new life."
he's like,
"My sister is my down payment."
and the scary part is how normal everyone acts. They don't whisper. They don't hesitate. They don't even feel guilty enough to lie convincingly. They treat your body like a bridge between two men's ambitions. One brother wants a throne. One warlord wants prestige. And you're the handshake. Psychologically, this is objectification, when your humanity gets reduced to your usefulness. You're not a person with preferences. You're a strategy with a pulse. And the tragedy is, you don't get to protest in a meaningful way. Because in this world, no isn't a boundary. It's a sound that gets ignored. So you smile. Because smiling is safer than honesty. And you enter the khalasar like,
Okay. New chapter.
meanwhile the universe is like,
New predator.
culture shock. Welcome to the horse empire. You think you're marrying into a culture. You are. A culture built on three things. Horses, violence, and confidence so aggressive it counts as a religion. They have their own language, their own rituals, their own rules about strength. And you learn them fast, because the consequences of ignorance are immediate. Let's talk about the horse thing, because it's not they like horses. It's horses are their personality. If you can't ride, you're not cute. You're a problem. Imagine being dropped into a society where walking is suspicious. A society where the ground is only used for fighting, sleeping, and dramatic death scenes. And everyone around you moves like they were born on horseback. Meanwhile, you're perched up there like,
Hello. I am fear.
you learn that balance isn't a skill. It's status. You're not just learning to ride. You're learning to be respected. And respect in the khalasar is not.
We value you.
It's,
We won't treat you like an inconvenience today.
so you do what Daenerys does. You adapt. You watch. You mimic. You learn the faces, the tones, the hierarchy. Because the khalasar isn't a family. It's a moving city held together by a man's reputation. And reputation is fragile, which means your safety is fragile. The wedding, celebration for them, exposure for you. Dothraki weddings are famous because they look insane. Everyone's eating, drinking, dancing, fighting. And the funniest part is how casual the violence is. Two guys duel. Somebody dies. Everyone claps like it's part of the entertainment package. There's literally that line.
A Dothraki wedding without at least 3 deaths is considered a dull affair.
Imagine your wedding being so toxic, the Yelp review is like,
Only 2 fatalities, mid.
and you're standing there in the middle of it, like a decorative hostage. Because weddings are supposed to be about union. Here, it's about power. The crowd is watching the call like,
Is he strong enough to keep us fed?
and they're watching you like,
Is she worthy of him?
worthiness is a recurring theme. You don't get to just exist. You have to be impressive. And then, the night comes. And this is where the dread lives. Because the show makes it very clear. Consent is not the cultural default here. So you learn another rule. The wedding doesn't end when the dancing stops. It ends when the Khal decides it ends. And if you're smart, if you're trying to survive, you do what Daenerys eventually does. You find a way to turn fear into strategy. You take the one thing you can control, your response. Not because it's romantic, because it's survival. That's called adaptive coping, when you make the best move in a situation you never asked to be in. And people love to call that strength, like it's a personality trait. But sometimes strength is just what your nervous system does when quitting isn't allowed. Khaleesi, congratulations, you're a title with conditions. Here's the trick about being a Dothraki bride. You don't just marry a man, you marry his stability. If he's powerful, you're Khaleesi. If he's weak, you're extra. That's it. That's the whole healthcare plan. Because the khalasar is loyal to Drogo, not to you, not to your feelings, not to your future. So, you live inside a conditional identity. People call you Khaleesi, sure, but the affection is rented. It's borrowed authority. And if you ever forget that, the khalasar reminds you, fast. You see it in how they treat Daenerys early on. They watch. They test. They push boundaries like it's sport. Because new Khaleesis are evaluated the same way, new weapons are evaluated by how well they function under stress. And the funniest tragedy is, you don't get taught the rules gently. You learn them in real time. You learn them when you make a mistake and everyone stares at you like,
Ah, she doesn't know the game.
the women's circle, your support system, is also surveillance. So, you meet the other women, the Khal's blood riders' wives, the attendants, the ones who've been here, and you think,
Okay. Maybe this is where I'll find comfort.
and it is kind of, but it's also complicated, because the women aren't just friends. They're also culture enforcers. They teach you what's acceptable. They correct you. They judge you. Their kindness comes with a theme. Learn fast. And then there's that phrase, the motto of the Dothraki,
It is known.
which is the most disrespectful sentence ever invented. Because it is known is not information. It is known is a shutdown button. You ask why something is the way it is, and they hit you with
It is known.
translation.
Stop asking questions. Questions are for people with options.
And psychologically, that's social conditioning. You're trained to accept the rules without challenging them, because challenging them implies you have the authority to negotiate. And you don't. So you learn to play the game politely. Smile. Nod. Be curious quietly. Save your opinions for when you're alone with the wind. The raids, when warrior culture becomes your daily background horror. Here's the part people avoid because it's not fun to talk about. The khalasar survives by taking. That's the economy. The men ride out. They bring back goods. They bring back captives. They bring back stories. And you, as a bride, are expected to accept it as normal. As tradition. As how things are. But how things are is still violence. It's still grief. It's still people being turned into objects. And if you're a bride with any kind of conscience, this is where the internal war begins. Because your comfort is built on someone else's suffering. And once you realize that, your brain has to do gymnastics to keep you functional. That's cognitive dissonance.
I'm safe because I belong here. But my safety is funded by harm.
So you either numb out, or you do what Daenerys does. You interfere. And when you interfere, you learn another lesson. Mercy is political. Helping people isn't just good. It's disruptive. Because in a system built on power, compassion is rebellion. Even when it's quiet compassion. Even when it's just saying, no. So your moral choices become dangerous. Not because you're wrong. Because you're challenging the engine. Pregnancy. You become an idea, not a person. Now, let's talk about the stallion who mounts the world prophecy. Because if you're pregnant in the khalasar, you don't just become a mother. You become a symbol. And symbols don't get peace. Symbols get expectations. Your body becomes public property in a new way. People touch your belly like it's a sacred artifact. They make plans around your child like your child is already a weapon. And if you're the bride, you're like,
Can I just be nauseous in private?
nope. You're carrying the future of a moving empire, which means you're not a person. You're a forecast. And that's the dread. You realize your value is always tied to what you produce. Marriage produces alliance. Pregnancy produces legacy. If you stop producing, you become optional. That's not love. That's utility wearing jewelry. The cliff. If your cow falls, you fall harder. This is the core terror of being a Dothraki bride. Your status is tethered to a man's life. Drogo gets hurt, and suddenly the air changes. The khalasar's confidence starts to wobble. And wobble in a war culture is not uncertainty. It's blood in the water. Because if the Khal dies, the khalasar fractures. Blood riders split. New leaders emerge. And the Khaleesi? The Khaleesi becomes a problem to be managed. You see it in the show. The moment Drogo becomes vulnerable, the world around Daenerys starts recalculating her worth. That's role collapse. When your identity is tied to a structure and the structure breaks. So, you learn. Your marriage isn't a bond. It's a platform. And the platform has one support beam. If it snaps, you don't just grieve. You get reassigned. Vaes Dothrak. The retirement plan is a cage with incense. Let's talk about the widows. The Dosh Khaleen. The Khaleesi retirement package. In theory, it sounds honorable. If your Khal dies, you go to Vaes Dothrak and live among the sacred women. Safe, respected, removed from politics. In practice, it's a gilded cage. You don't get to remarry. You don't get to choose a new life. You don't get to become a person again. You get archived. Like,
Thank you for your service. Please report to the museum.
and what's wild is, that's still the best case scenario. Because the alternative is being tossed into the chaos of a fractured khalasar, where you are now unprotected. So, Vaes Dothrak becomes this haunting truth. Even the safe place is still control. It's still a system telling you, your life belongs to the tradition now. Why? It really sucks. You're always one mood away from losing everything. It sucks to be a Dothraki bride because you live inside conditions. Your safety depends on his strength, his reputation, his health, his mood, the khalasar's loyalty, your ability to adapt, your ability to perform confidence while terrified. You're constantly translating. Language, customs, danger. Your nervous system never fully unclenches. Because the world you're in doesn't reward softness. It rewards certainty. And if you came from a different world, like Daenerys did, you're also carrying another grief. The grief of realizing how quickly people can treat a human life like currency. So you learn to become something else. Not because you wanted to, because the environment forces evolution. You become sharp. You become strategic. You become brave. And yes, people will call that empowerment. But empowerment that begins with coercion is complicated. It's messy. It's survival wearing a crown. And that's the tragedy. You don't get to choose who you become in peace. You become who you need to be in crisis. You didn't marry into love. You married into a machine. If you want the thesis clean, a Dothraki bride isn't living a romance. She's living a political survival simulation. You don't get to be naive. You don't get to be soft for long. You don't get to be just a girl. You are taught, by culture, by danger, by expectation, to become a role. Khaleesi, symbol, mother, asset. And the world will praise you as strong, while ignoring the fact that you had to become strong to stay alive. So, yeah, that's why it sucks to be a Dothraki bride. Because your wedding is a transaction. Your safety is conditional. And your identity is always being negotiated by people who aren't you. So, tell me, who should I dissect next? Drop your favorite character to psychoanalyze in the comments. Smash that like button if your brain feels 40% more suspicious of weddings, but 60% more lore aware. And hit subscribe if you're into ideas that stick, figures that sketch. Ready for your next system update? Tap here and keep playing smart.